My name is Alice. I'm 29, and every weekday of my adult life used to begin the same way, with me staring at my reflection in the elevator doors of Technova's 7th floor, mentally preparing myself for whatever flavor of chaos waited inside. Technova liked to brand itself as innovative, agile, and a vibrant workplace family, which, translated from corporate dialect, meant prepare for unpredictable nonsense, perform enthusiasm on command, and pretend it's all totally normal. I wasn't a pessimist. In fact, I liked my job, at least the parts of it that involved actual work. I was a data analyst, the kind who enjoys finding patterns in messy information and feels a small, almost embarrassing thrill when a model runs without errors. My desk was tucked near the window, the one spot in the office that didn't feel like a colony of beige stress. I was good at what I did. People knew it. Even the people who pretended not to know it knew it. Most mornings started with my coworker Lena leaning over our shared partition and whispering the day's "You won't believe this" report, usually involving someone in management doing something outdated, impractical, or aggressively pointless. She had perfect comedic timing for someone who was always on the verge of quitting. On the morning everything changed, I walked in carrying my usual overpriced latte and trying not to make eye contact with the motivational poster HR had hung by the entrance. It featured a group of people in matching t-shirts, smiling way too hard under the caption, "Family isn't just blood, it's team." Nothing wakes you up like a vague threat disguised as positivity. "Morning, warrior," Lena said as I set my bag down. "I prefer survivor," I told her. "Did you check your inbox yet?" "Do I look like I've mentally prepared myself for that kind of suffering?" She snorted. "You should. Mason sent out another culture memo." "Ah, Mason, our department's manager." A man who believed two things with absolute certainty. One, he was a visionary leader, and two, the rest of us were under-motivated disappointments in need of spontaneous morale-boosting activities. Ideally, ones that required us to sacrifice personal time and clap for him. I opened my inbox, and there it was. An email titled Mandatory Team Building Weekend. Family attendance expected. Weekend. Mandatory. Family attendance expected. I clicked it. The details were worse. They were planning a 2-day retreat at a remote lakeside lodge, no guest rooms, for anyone who wanted to come alone. No option to skip, and a clear implication that attendance would be interpreted as proof of loyalty and commitment to our company community. I blinked slowly, rereading it as if maybe the words would rearrange into something sane. Lena groaned. "It's like a cult, but with spreadsheets." "I don't even have a partner or kids," I said. "What do they want me to bring? A houseplant?" "You could bring your peace and independence. They'll hate that." We laughed, but underneath it, something in my stomach tightened. I already knew I couldn't go. My younger brother had a medical appointment that weekend one I needed to be there for. And frankly, even if I'd been free, forcing people to attend weekend retreats felt less like bonding and more like testing who's willing to give up their life for a job that paid barely enough to justify groceries. But I tried to stay calm, logical, reasonable. I replied to the email directly, explaining my conflict, offering to participate in preparations during work hours, and assuring them it had nothing to do with my performance or dedication. A few hours later, I received a response. Short, chilly, and impossible to misinterpret. "Alice, attendance is not optional. This is a critical demonstration of your commitment to our workplace family. We expect to see you there." I stared at the screen in disbelief. My commitment. My workplace family. As if my real family, my actual breathing, non-corporate family, mattered less. I sat back in my chair, suddenly aware of the faint buzzing in my ears. That was the first moment I felt the shift like a hairline crack forming in a wall I'd spent years politely leaning against. I didn't know yet that everything would collapse 2 days later. But the crack was where it started. The 2 days leading up to the so-called team-building retreat felt like standing in the shadow of something slowly tipping over, waiting for it to fall. I tried to focus on my work, but every time I opened an email, I braced myself for another passive-aggressive reminder from management. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with split reactions, half the team feigning excitement, the other half quietly panicking about rearranging their lives for a weekend they didn't ask for. By Friday morning, I still hadn't changed my stance. I couldn't go. My brother's appointment wasn't something I could move, and I wasn't going to abandon him so I could clap along to trust fall exercises. Around 10 a.m., Mason appeared behind my desk, like a discount horror movie jump scare. He crossed his arms over his Technova-branded quarter zip and gave me the expression he reserved for people who didn't instantly comply. "Alice, can we chat in my office?" Not a question. A summons. I followed him down the hall, passing coworkers whose sympathetic glances said everything. "Good luck. We're praying for you. Or for us. Or both." The moment the door shut, Mason gestured to the chair across from him. "I'm concerned about your attitude." That was his opener. No warm-up, no easing in. Straight to character assessment. "My attitude?" I asked. "Because I can't attend the weekend retreat?" "Because you're choosing not to," he corrected, leaning back. "This event is extremely important to our internal culture. Your absence would send the wrong message." I kept my tone steady. "I already explained, I have a family responsibility Saturday morning. I can be available afterward, but I can't be at the lodge by sunrise." He sighed dramatically, the way people do when they want you to feel like a burden. "Alice, this company isn't just about work. It's about commitment, reliability, showing up." "I do show up," I said. "Every single day." "That's not the point." Of course it wasn't. It never was. He clasped his hands, lowering his voice into something meant to sound wise. "You're talented, but talent without dedication isn't valuable. We need team players. We need people who trust the process." I felt a flicker of irritation. "You mean people who don't have a life outside the company?" "I mean people who prioritize the team." The way he said it made my skin crawl. The team. Their favorite word. A shield. A weapon. A measuring stick they used to punish anyone who had boundaries. "I can't be in two places at once," I said. "This isn't about priorities. It's about reality." Mason frowned. "Reality is what you make it." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop from laughing. Was that an inspirational quote or evidence that he'd lost touch with the human experience? He continued, "I expect to see you at the retreat. If you care about your future here, I strongly encourage you to reconsider." There it was, the threat, wrapped in corporate politeness, but sharp enough to cut. I swallowed the anger bubbling up in my throat and stood. I've made my decision. When I left his office, Lena pulled me into the supply closet before I even reached my desk. "What did he say?" she whispered, eyes wide. "The usual, that by not attending, I'm destroying the fabric of the universe." She winced. "He's not going to let this go." I know. That evening, I went straight from work to my brother's apartment. We ate pasta, watched dumb videos, and tried to pretend nothing stressful hovered over me. But the whole time, my brain kept looping the same thought. How far are they willing to take this? Saturday morning came. I stayed with my brother, exactly where I promised I would be. He needed me, and I wasn't going to punish myself for choosing him over some lakeside corporate circus. By noon, my phone had 5 missed calls, 3 texts from HR, and 1 email marked urgent. I didn't answer any of them. For the first time in a long time, I made a choice entirely for myself. And it felt good. Or at least, it felt right. I didn't know that while I was sitting in a waiting room beside my brother, everyone else was arriving at the retreat smiling stiffly for photos, pretending to enjoy warm soda and soggy sandwiches, and listening to speeches about synergy. I didn't know that the team was whispering about me. I didn't know that Mason was already planning his next move. All I knew was that I'd done the right thing, and I had no idea how quickly they would turn that into the wrong one. When I got back home that evening, I felt strangely peaceful. tired but peaceful. I made tea, curled up on the couch, and let myself believe for a moment that maybe work would calm down once the retreat was over. Maybe Mason would realize the world hadn't ended because I wasn't there to applaud his leadership exercises. That hope lasted exactly 14 hours. Sunday morning, I woke up to a notification from my work email. The subject line hit me like ice water. Immediate termination notice. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped my phone. My hands shook as I opened the email. It was short, corporate short, the kind of short that tries to sound professional but still feels like a slap. Alice, due to your failure to attend the mandatory team-building retreat and your pattern of demonstrating insufficient commitment to our workplace culture, we are terminating your employment effective immediately. Please return all company property by Monday at 9 a.m. Human Resources. No meeting, no conversation, no chance to explain. Just a sentence saying everything I'd built was gone because I didn't attend a weekend getaway. The room tilted a little. I put my phone down, swallowing the rise of heat, disbelief, and something sharper, something like betrayal. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, breathing through the shock. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to scream. But mostly, I was frozen. I'd always known the company had issues, but firing me over this? Over choosing my brother and my own boundaries? It felt unreal. Eventually, I called Lena. She answered on the first ring. Alice? Oh my God. Tell me it's not true. It's true, I said quietly. I got the email. She cursed under her breath. People are furious here. Everyone saw Mason pacing around yesterday, talking about non-compliance and standards. But nobody thought he'd actually convince HR to fire you. Guess he did, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's been strutting around the lodge acting like he's saving the company from your rebellion, she added. If I see him holding another inspirational clipboard, I swear. Normally, she'd make me laugh. Today, nothing felt funny. We talked for a few more minutes before she had to hang up. Apparently, the group was being herded into a trust circle. The irony was suffocating. After the call, I sat alone in my quiet apartment, letting the weight of it settle. I'd been fired. Not for incompetence. Not for misconduct. Not for anything remotely related to my actual job. I was fired for not participating in a performance of company loyalty. Anger slowly started to replace the numbness. It grew quietly at first, like a spark catching on dry leaves. How many times had I stayed late to fix someone else's mistake? How many projects had I saved at the last minute? How many weekends had I already given to that place voluntarily? And this was how they repaid me. I stood up, paced, sat back down, stood up again. My thoughts were a swirl of disbelief and an emerging, simmering clarity. They thought I would just accept it. They thought I would hand over my badge, shuffle away, and let them rewrite the story however they wanted. They had no idea who I was. By afternoon, something inside me snapped into place, a feeling sharp, focused, and strangely calm. If they wanted to make this ugly, fine. But I wasn't going to let them bury me. I opened my laptop, pulled up my personal files, and began collecting everything I had ever documented. Emails, Slack messages, screenshots, reports, instances of ignored complaints, unpaid overtime, and inappropriate corporate behavior. Not to use maliciously, not to destroy anyone unfairly, but to defend myself. I wasn't looking for revenge, but I wasn't going to let injustice walk away smiling. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, though there was some of that, but because something stronger was building deep in my chest. A strategy, a plan, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Let them think firing me was the end of the story. It was only the end of their version. My version was just beginning. By Monday morning, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin, but underneath it was something steadier. A quiet, controlled determination. I got dressed, tied my hair back, and drove to the office to return my badge and laptop like the email demanded. The lobby felt different when you weren't an employee anymore. colder, like a place you'd once belonged but now stood outside of, even while walking through it. The receptionist, Jenna, looked up when I approached. Her eyes widened. "Oh, Alice. I didn't think you'd come in. I was told to return my things," I said. She hesitated. "HR will, meet you in the small conference room." Her voice was too soft, too careful. She already knew what they'd done. People always know, even when no one says it. I walked down the hall and pushed open the door of the conference room. 2 members of HR sat waiting. Both of them trying so hard to look neutral, they ended up looking guilty instead. "Thank you for coming in," one of them said, folding her hands primly. I placed the laptop and badge on the table. "Here." The other HR rep cleared his throat. "Alice, we want to remind you that your termination was in accordance with company policy." I laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, but because the attempt was pathetic. "In accordance with what?" I asked. He blinked. "Company policy regarding mandatory culture events." "Right," I said. "Tell me, is that written in the employee handbook? Or is it just something Mason says out loud until people stop questioning it?" The woman shifted uncomfortably. "We understand this may be difficult." "You fired me by email," I said. "You don't get to pretend this is emotional support hour." Silence. They weren't expecting pushback. They certainly weren't expecting me to show up with composure instead of tears. I leaned back in my chair. Just to be clear, I did nothing that violated my job responsibilities. I completed every assignment. I had no disciplinary history. And you fired me for missing a weekend event unrelated to my actual role. "We expect full participation in team-building initiatives," the man said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Good luck explaining that to anyone outside this building," I replied. Something flickered across their faces, fear maybe, or the realization that this could get messy for them. "We hope," the woman said, choosing her words carefully, "that you will choose to move forward peacefully." Peacefully, meaning quietly, meaning don't talk, don't post, don't fight back. I stood. I haven't decided yet. As I turned to leave, the woman added, "We're sorry it had to end like this." I paused with my hand on the door. It didn't have to. Walking out of that conference room felt like stepping out of a fog. They expected that meeting to humiliate me, to make me small, to convince me I'd lost everything, but instead, it clarified something deep in my gut. They weren't powerful. They were terrified of anyone who didn't fall in line. I left the building without looking back. Outside, I stood for a moment, letting the sunlight hit my face. It was brighter than it had any right to be. The air felt cleaner, sharper. Maybe it was because I was no longer breathing recycled office air. Or maybe it was because I felt the shift something real, something pivotal. When I got home, I opened my laptop again and kept working through everything I'd gathered. Messages from employees describing unpaid overtime, screenshots of managers strongly suggesting people skip lunches, emails where certain staff were praised for sacrificing their personal lives for the team. Patterns emerged. Ugly ones. Not just my story. Everyone's. That evening, I got a text from Lena. "Alice, something's happening. Camilla from Tech Truth is tweeting about a toxic culture in a mid-sized tech company. People think she's talking about us." I froze. Camilla, the influencer known for exposing unethical workplaces. Millions of followers, a reputation for accuracy. Before I could process, another message came from her. She says an employee reached out anonymously, and more people are starting to add details. My heart thudded once sharply, not fear anticipation. I hadn't contacted Camilla, but someone had. The conversation erupted online, small details at first, then bigger ones, anonymous employees describing pressure, burnout, fear-driven management. And then, someone leaked the memo about mandatory family attendance. That was the moment everything ignited. People outside the company started quoting it with disbelief. Commentators called it cult-like. Former employees chimed in with stories. Journalists started reaching out. By nightfall, Technova wasn't trending for its new product features. It was trending for me. Not my name, but my situation. The employee fired for missing a weekend retreat. The one punished for having a real family. For the first time since the termination email, I felt something unfreeze inside my chest. Not relief, not victory. Just the realization that the story was bigger than I ever expected, and it was no longer something I had to fight alone. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept replaying the look on Claire's face during the meeting, the flicker of panic she tried to hide, the way she clutched her tablet like it was a life raft. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. Not exactly. More like a strange, heavy clarity. The kind you get when you finally understand the rules of a game you never agreed to play. By morning, my inbox was a war zone. Messages from old coworkers. Messages from people I barely talked to. Messages from people who used to avoid eye contact with me in the hallway. Is it true? What happened? Are you okay? Please tell me you didn't actually destroy the entire operations system. I answered none of them. Instead, I showered, ate toast that tasted like cardboard, and left the apartment before my brain could talk me out of my next move. I wasn't done. The company had built its reputation on being transparent, ethical, human-centered, and all the other buzzwords executives sprinkle into their quarterly reports. But the truth was, what I had always seen from my desk. Unpaid overtime disguised as dedication, people penalized for having lives, managers punishing anyone who didn't worship their authority. They fired me for choosing my mother over their camping trip. They humiliated me for it. And now the dominoes were falling exactly where they never expected them to. I walked into Helios's lobby like I still worked there. Shoulders back, chin up, coffee in hand. The receptionist, who used to pretend I wasn't real, stood up so fast her chair squeaked. Alice, hi-do, you have an appointment? Yep, I said, walking past her before she could react. With consequences. She didn't follow me. The elevator ride felt too slow, like time was stretching just to mess with me. When the doors opened on the 10th floor, the air hit me immediately, thick, tense, buzzing with panic. People were pacing, whispering, huddled in corners like they were plotting an escape. Marcus spotted me first. He rushed over, eyes wide. Holy hell, Alice! Did you see the server logs? Everything is flagged. Everything. They're freaking out. I noticed, I said. Claire is losing it, he whispered. She called an emergency meeting. She looks like she hasn't blinked since yesterday. I didn't have time to respond. Claire's office door slammed open, and she stepped out, hair frazzled, makeup faded, expression stretched so tight it looked painful. When she saw me, her whole face contorted. What are you doing here? She hissed. Returning company property, I said, holding up my old badge. Thought it was the polite thing to do. You're not allowed up here. Relax, I'm not touching anything. Although from the sound of it, everything you touched lately is falling apart on its own. Color rose in her face, anger mixed with fear. You think this is funny? She snapped. You think you can waltz in here after what you did? I didn't do anything wrong, I said calmly. I documented what was already wrong. Maybe you should try it sometime. A few people nearby pretended to check their emails, but their ears were practically leaning toward us. You are finished, she said in a low voice. Do you understand me? Nobody will hire you after this. Nobody. That's interesting, I said, because I already had 3 offers this morning. She blinked. That rattled her more than I expected. You're lying. I don't need to lie to you. Before she could respond, a voice called her name. One of the senior directors waved her toward the glass conference room. He looked pale. They want you, I said, probably to ask why the company's entire workflow history has been audited and forwarded to legal. She froze. Just for a moment, a tiny moment. But I saw it. She knew. She knew the game wasn't in her favor anymore. I stepped back, letting her pass. She brushed my shoulder as she walked by, maybe on purpose, maybe not. The conference room door closed behind her, and although the room was soundproof, I still saw the director's hands slam onto the table. I turned to leave. I'd done what I came to do. My badge clattered onto the front desk on my way out. The moment I stepped outside into the cold air, something in me loosened. Not relief, not triumph, just space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space that had been squeezed out of me for years by an office that pretended to be a family. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Alice, this is Jenna from Corporate Legal. We need to speak with you. It's important." For a second, I just stared at it. Then I laughed quietly, tiredly, because I knew exactly what that meant. They finally realized the problem wasn't me, and the fallout had only just begun. I didn't answer Jenna from legal right away. I let the message sit there while I walked 3 blocks, bought a sandwich I wasn't hungry for, and sat on a bench facing the river. The wind was cold, sharp, but it helped clear the tension from behind my eyes. I knew why she wanted to talk, and honestly, I was done being the one who panicked first. After about 20 minutes, I finally called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Alice? Thank you. I appreciate you returning my message." Her voice was steady, professional, but there was something tight underneath it. Pressure, urgency. The sound of someone who'd been handed a situation wrapped in alarm bells. "What's this about?" I asked. "I'd prefer to discuss it in person," she said. "Today, if possible." "No," I said simply. "You can tell me now." There was a pause, papers shuffling, then a quiet sigh. "Fine. We've received a series of system audit logs, rather extensive ones. They point to significant policy violations, managerial misconduct, and potential negligence. You were the last employee with administrative familiarity in that department, so we want to understand what happened. In other words, please explain why our house is on fire and who lit the match." "I didn't breach anything," I said. "I didn't alter systems. I didn't damage systems. I simply collected evidence of how things actually operated." Another pause. A longer one. "So you're confirming the logs are real?" "Yes," I said. "And everything in them was already happening. I didn't create the problems. I just stopped pretending they didn't exist." Her exhale told me that was both exactly what she expected and exactly what she feared. "Helios takes these allegations very seriously," she said. "We may need your cooperation during our internal investigation." "I'm not an employee anymore, remember? Your company made that very clear." "We're aware," she said, "but your insight could be valuable." I let that hang in the air. "What's going to happen to Claire?" I finally asked. Another shuffle of papers, another silence. Then, carefully, "I can't discuss personnel matters, but I think you already know." I did. And I didn't feel guilty about it, not even a little. We ended the call with a vague, polite promise that she'd follow up soon. But the moment I hung up, I felt something shift in me, like a taut wire had finally snapped. I wasn't part of their mess anymore. I didn't have to fix it. I didn't have to justify myself to people who treated compassion like a scheduling conflict. My life was mine again. I went home, made tea, and opened my laptop not to job search, because I'd already done more than enough of that in my life. Instead, I finally read the emails from the companies that reached out after the news leaked. 3 offers, 3 different industries, 3 teams that looked at my resume and said, "How are you ever unemployed?" Instead of, "We're a family here, so cancel your plans." I opened the offer from Meridian Systems first. Flexible hours, fully remote option. A manager who, during my interview, said, "We want humans, not robots." I'd almost cried when she said that. Almost. But it was the second email, the one from a small startup run by 2 women who left toxic workplaces just like mine, that made me smile. "We don't care about mandatory bonding trips. We care about good people," they wrote. and we'd love for you to join us. For the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel tight. That evening, I visited my mom. She was sitting on the couch with her favorite blanket and a half-finished crossword puzzle. When I walked in, she gave me that soft, knowing smile only mothers seem capable of. "You look lighter," she said. "I think I am." She made tea while I told her everything, what happened, what I did, what the company was dealing with now. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She just listened, then squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You stood up for yourself. Not many people do that." I went home that night with her words still warming me from the inside. The next morning, I accepted the offer from the startup. A week later, the news broke that Helios was undergoing a formal investigation. Claire had been removed from her position, the board was restructuring management, and HR released a meaningless statement about reinforcing ethical leadership. Coworkers kept messaging me, "You started an earthquake. You did what all of us were too afraid to do. They're terrified of you." But I didn't feel like an earthquake. I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt like someone who finally walked away from a table where the game had always been rigged. My first day at the new job felt like stepping into sunlight after forgetting what warmth was. My new team was kind, honest, normal. Nobody called it a family. Nobody asked about loyalty tests disguised as bonding activities. They asked what hours I preferred, what tools I needed, how they could make my first week easier. It felt surreal. In the best way. A few days later, while unpacking my bag, I found my old Helios badge wedged between two notebooks. I held it for a moment, staring at the photo of me from 3 years ago. I looked tired in the picture. Smaller somehow, like I was trying to shrink myself to fit into a place that didn't deserve me. I dropped the badge into the trash without hesitation. On my walk home that evening, I realized something simple but profound. Losing that job wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The company lost more than just me, but I finally found myself again, and I wasn't planning on losing that twice.